The wind tears across the desert of Uz, pulling the sand into a violent, deafening column. A man covered in ash and sores covers his face, waiting for an answer to his suffering. Instead, the maker of the universe speaks out of the whirlwind, and he speaks in impossible questions. Read Job 38-31 through 33 inches, the King James Version. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season? Or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Stop right there. Look at the verbs the Lord uses to interrogate a broken man. Bind, loose, bring forth, guide. God is not asking Job if he appreciates the beauty of the night sky. He is demanding to know if Job possesses the mechanical authority to operate the stars. He asks Job if he knows the ordinances of heaven. That word in the Hebrew is chukah. It means an appointed law, a strict boundary, a physical limit drawn in stone. Picture it. The ancient Hebrew mind did not look up and see a chaotic, endless vacuum of floating gas. They saw a great clockwork, a heavily governed architecture. And God's challenge to Job is the ultimate rhetorical checkmate. Have you seen the gears? The canonical text assumes the answer is a trembling, silent no. No mortal has touched the mechanics of the sky. No mortal has seen where the stars enter and exit the dome of the world. Read that again. No mortal. Because thousands of years before Job sat in the ash, another man walked the earth. A man who, according to a massive, ancient Jewish tradition, did not have to guess how the stars moved. He was taken to the very edge of the world to watch them do it. Enter First Enoch, an ancient Jewish writing preserved whole in the Ethiopian Bible. It is a book the Western Church set aside, kept whole by another tradition. Inside its pages, specifically chapters 33 through 36, it records a physical journey. It claims Enoch, the seventh generation from Adam, was brought by angels to the extremities of the earth. See the scene. Enoch does not float into abstract spiritual realms. He walks to the physical borders where the landmass of the earth drops off and meets the sky. And what he finds there is the core of our mystery. He does not find empty space. He finds the great gates of heaven. He records seeing literal, massive portals at the eastern edge of creation, where the stars and the seasons are marshaled, counted, and released with terrifying precision. He maps a cosmos that operates under unbreakable physical law. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact. Test it the way the Bereans tested everything, but sit with that. God asked Job if he knew the secret, physical paths of the stars, assuming no living man had ever stood at the gates of the sky. But the ancient world held a persistent memory that the answer to God's whirlwind interrogation was already mapped by a man who vanished before the flood. The canonical text leaves the celestial boundaries hidden, but an ancient witness claims to have touched their architecture. How exactly did the seventh from Adam end up at the terrifying border of the cosmos? The fifth chapter of Genesis is a graveyard. It is a long, heavy rhythm of mortality, charting the bloodline from Adam down to Noah. You can hear the slow, mechanical drumbeat of the Edenic curse in every paragraph. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. And all the days of Enos were 905 years, and he died, and he died, and he died, and he died. 8 times. The canonical text ends a human life with those 3 unyielding words. It is the absolute, unbroken rule of a fallen world. Until the rhythm hits the 7th generation. Read Genesis 5, 24 inches, the King James. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Stop right there. Look at the fracture in the text. The drumbeat stops. There is no body, there is no burial. There is only an abrupt, physical absence. Watch what the text does with the word took. The Hebrew root is lakach. It does not mean to peacefully transition into a spiritual afterlife. It means to seize, to lay hold of, to physically extract and carry away. The text does not say Enoch's spirit departed. It says the man himself, flesh and bone, was removed from the coordinate grid of human society. But a physical man requires a physical location. If he did not die, where was he placed? The canonical text draws a curtain over the destination. It simply says he was no longer here. But the ancient Jewish scribes did not leave that coordinate blank. There is an older Jewish writing, the Book of Jubilees, called by the early church the Little Genesis, which expands the borders of this patriarch's sudden departure. Jubilees chapter 4 records an incredibly specific detail about the seventh from Adam. It claims Enoch was the first man born on earth who learned the art of writing. Why did he need to write? Jubilees tells us he was taken away from the children of men to serve a strict, mechanical purpose. He was relocated to write down the signs of heaven, the paths of the sun, and the exact physical order of their months. Picture it. A man, pulled out of his era, handed a stylus, and tasked with charting the terrifying machinery of the cosmos. I offer it as that, one tradition's record. But see how it perfectly aligns with the blank space Genesis left behind. God did not just hide Enoch to spare him from death. He extracted him for an assignment. And this is where the physical thread of our mystery tightens. To map the paths of the stars, you cannot stand in a valley. You cannot look up from a desert tent and guess at their mechanics. You have to go to the source. You have to trace the burning light back to the exact place it enters the dome of the world. Genesis says he was taken. Jubilees says he was taken to map the sky, but to find out exactly where. The angels carried him to do that mapping. We have to follow him out of the inhabited world entirely. We have to walk with him to a border no modern map acknowledges. A living man is about to step up to the absolute edge of the earth. What exactly does the night sky look like when you can reach out and touch the wall it rests on? The ground stops. That is the first thing he notices. The solid rock of the inhabited world drops off into a terrifying expanse. First, Enoch chapter 33 opens with a geographic impossibility. The patriarch writes, "And from thence I went to the ends of the earth, and I saw the ends of the earth whereon the heaven rests, and the portals of the heaven open." Read that again. The ends of the earth where the heaven rests. In the modern mind, the sky is an endless vacuum. It never touches the ground. But the ancient Hebrew cosmology saw a dome, a physical firmament that required a foundation, a massive canopy bolted to the extreme edges of the terrestrial plane. Go back to the canonical text. Go back to God speaking out of the storm in Job. Read Job 38. 18 inches, the King James. Hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare if thou knowest it all. Stop right there. The word for breadth in the Hebrew is reshab. It means a wide, physical expanse, a literal width that can be measured. God dares Job to claim he has walked all the way to the boundary wall of creation. Job is silent. But the ancient tradition claims the man pulled from the seventh generation of Genesis stood on that exact precipice. Watch what the text does. Enoch is not floating in a spiritual vision. He is walking on foot to the extreme edge of the landmass. This is the coordinate where the curtain of the sky touches the dirt. And when he arrives, he does not just see a blank retaining wall. He sees architecture. He sees the portals, the great gates. Picture it. Massive, physical doorways built into the seam of the universe. This is not poetry. Enoch records the mechanics of what he is looking at. He sees the stars of heaven coming forth from these gates. He stands there, a lone mortal removed from his timeline, and watches the burning entities of the night sky stage themselves at the doors of the horizon. Pull a cross-reference from the Psalms. Read Psalm 19:4 and 5 inches the King James. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. We read that as a beautiful metaphor. But look at the Hebrew word for chamber, chufah. It means a canopy, a literal enclosed room. David wrote poetry about the sun emerging from a hidden chamber. Enoch claims he walked to the edge of the world and stared at the massive physical doors of that exact room. Same God, same challenge, same universe. God asks Job if he knows the ordinances of heaven. Enoch says he stood at the threshold where those ordinances are executed. But a gate implies a system. It implies something is being kept out or something is being marshaled in. A massive cosmic door requires a schedule. If the stars are coming out of these eastern portals, they are not just drifting aimlessly through the void. They are following a terrifying, rigid order. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact. But look at the obsession with precision. Enoch does not just sit in awe. Jubilees told us he was taken to write, so he pulls out his stylus. He starts counting the stars. He records the exact number of the portals, the exact names of the celestial bodies, and the exact order in which they are permitted to enter the sky. He maps the sunrise, not as a glowing phenomenon, but as a heavily governed crossing of a boundary line. The edge of the earth is not a quiet place, but a heavily guarded staging ground for the machinery of the sky. The eastern gates are opening, and the entities behind them are waiting for their appointed time. What exactly comes out of those portals, and who is standing there to make sure the burning stars do not break their ranks? The horizon breaks, but it does not break randomly. A blinding light cuts through the darkness, pouring out of a measured, structural opening in the eastern wall of the world. Enoch is standing at the precipice, holding his stylus. He is not watching a sunrise, he is watching a deployment. In the 33rd chapter of 1st Enoch, the patriarch documents exactly what happens at the eastern edge of creation. He writes, "And I saw how the stars of heaven come forth, and I counted the portals out of which they proceed, and wrote down all their outlets." He counts the doors. He records their exact measurements. He writes down the precise names of the stars, their appointed courses, their positions, and the exact months they are permitted to emerge. He is not alone at this border. The text tells us an entity is standing beside him, dictating the schedule. It is the angel Uriel, whose name in Hebrew means the fire of God. Uriel is the appointed warden of the luminaries. He holds the manifest. Picture it. The night sky is not a passive tapestry. It is an active, highly regimented operation. Every star has a designated gate. Every gate has a designated month. Go to the canonical text. We read the Psalms as ancient poetry, but what if David was recording the exact same mechanical reality Enoch witnessed? Read Psalm 147, 4 inches the King James. He telleth the number of the stars, he calleth them all by their names. Stop right there. Look at the verb telleth. In modern English, that sounds like simple awareness. But the Hebrew root is manah. It means to mathematically tally, to weigh out, to appoint an exact quota. Now look at kaleth. The Hebrew is kara. It means to summon, to cry out loud, to read from a ledger, a literal roll call. God is not just passively aware of the burning gas in space. He is actively numbering and summoning distinct entities. And according to the ancient Enochic tradition, the physical execution of that daily roll call happens at the extreme eastern gates of the world. Uriel reads the name. The gate opens. The star steps forward into the dome of the sky. If a star misses its appointed gate, the calendar shatters. If the calendar breaks, the Moedim, the appointed feasts and holy days of Leviticus, are out of alignment. The architecture of the sky is inextricably tied to the law of God on earth. There is no room for deviation. The gates are terrifyingly strict. This is one reading, not the final word. But sit with the sheer weight of this precision. Enoch stands at the eastern extreme, watching Uriel marshal the blinding fire of the cosmos through physical doorways. He writes down the names. He maps the grid. He is looking directly at the ordinances of heaven that God will later hurl at Job out of the desert whirlwind. He knows how they enter. But observing the doors is only the first half of the revelation. Because once these bodies cross the threshold of the eastern gates, they have to move across the massive expanse of the firmament. And in the mind of the ancient Hebrew, they do not just float. The eastern portals govern their entrance. But what exactly carries the stars across the dark canopy of the world? The star clears the threshold of the eastern gate. The blinding light enters the dark canopy of the world. It is out in the open now, but it does not simply drift into the vacuum of space. Modern astronomy tells us we are standing on a spinning rock, watching stationary fires burn billions of light years away. But the ancient Hebrew mind saw the sky itself turning above a fixed earth. And in that terrifying, ancient architecture, the stars required a mechanism to move. Go to the canonical text. During the darkest days of the Judges, Deborah sings a battle anthem after the Canaanite army is destroyed. Read Judges 5:20 inches, the King James. They fought from heaven, the stars in their courses fought against Sisera. Stop right there. Look at the word courses. In modern English, a course is just a general direction, a vague trajectory. But the Hebrew root here is mesila. It means a raised highway, a viaduct, a literal, constructed track. Read that again. The stars are on a track. And if they are moving along a constructed highway, they are being driven. This is where first Enoch pulls back the curtain on the exact machinery of the night sky. In the 18th chapter, and again as he stands at the borders of the earth in chapter 36, the patriarch looks up at the firmament and records a massive turning system. He writes that he saw the winds of heaven, but they were not just blowing air. He saw the winds acting as the physical gears of the cosmos. He records that the winds turn the sky, and they drive the chariots of the stars. Picture it. A burning, celestial entity steps out of the eastern portal. The track is already laid. The vehicle is waiting. The wind is the unseen beast, pulling the chariot across the massive dome of the earth. We treat this as pure mythology, an archaic fairy tale. But watch what the canonical text does with this exact imagery. Read Psalm 104. 3 inches the King James, the psalmist writes of the Lord, who maketh the clouds his chariot, who walketh upon the wings of the wind. The biblical authors constantly associate the sky, the clouds, and the winds with physical chariots, and the entities riding in them are not just glowing rocks. When Moses warns the Israelites against idolatry in Deuteronomy 4:19, he commands them not to worship the sun, the moon, and the stars, even all the host of heaven. That word for host is tzaba. It means a massed army, a military regiment. Same sky, same entities. The canonical text calls them an army. First, Enoch tells us how the army is transported. This is one reading, not the final word. But see how the Enochic cosmology locks perfectly into the vocabulary of the Old Testament. The sky is a military staging ground. The stars are the soldiers. The mesila is the highway. The winds are the engines pulling the chariots across the dark expanse of the firmament. Enoch stands at the extreme eastern border of the world and watches this massive, terrifying machinery grind into motion. Every single star knows its name, its gate, its chariot, and its track. Nothing is random. Everything is bound to an appointed law. God's challenge to Job is no longer an abstract poem about the beauty of the night. It is a demand to know if Job has seen the tracks. But a track has a destination. A raised highway across the vault of heaven must eventually reach the other side. If the stars are marshaled out of the eastern portals, and if they board their wind-driven chariots to cross the canopy of the world, what is waiting to receive them when the long night is finally over? The chariot reaches the far side of the firmament. The burning light of the star begins its descent, dropping toward the opposite retaining wall of the world. Enoch is no longer standing at the sunrise. According to the 35th chapter of his record, the patriarch has crossed the massive coordinate grid of the earth to stand at the absolute western edge. He watches the star approach the boundary. It does not just fade out into an endless horizon. It enters a door. First, Enoch records that the western wall is identical to the eastern wall. It possesses the exact same number of portals, built in the exact same architectural order. What comes out of the east must return into the west. The calendar of the sky is a closed, inescapable loop. Go back to the canonical text. Read Psalm 65, 8 inches, the King James. They also that dwell in the uttermost parts are afraid at thy tokens. Thou makest the outgoings of the morning and evening to rejoice. Stop right there. Look at the word outgoings. The Hebrew is mautzah. It means a place of going forth, a literal exit, a physical gate. The psalmist is placing distinct physical gateways at both the morning and the evening, at the east and at the west. Picture it. The ancient cosmology does not allow for a single star to slip its track. The gates of the west are waiting to receive exactly what the gates of the east deployed. But Enoch's journey does not end at the sunset. He turns. In chapter 34, he walks to the extreme northern edge of the world. And here, the sky changes. He does not just see the staging ground for the stars, he sees the armory of the elements. He writes that he saw 3 portals of heaven open in the north. Out of them proceed cold, hail, frost, snow, dew, and rain. Test it the way the Bereans tested everything. But bring that image straight back to the voice in the whirlwind. Read Job 38, 22 inches, the King James. God demands of Job, hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail? Read that again. The treasures. We read that as a metaphor for beauty, but the Hebrew word is outsar. It means a physical vault, a fortified storehouse, a literal armory with doors. God is not asking Job if he thinks the snow is pretty. He is asking Job if he has walked to the extreme edge of the world and looked inside the heavily guarded warehouse where the winter is physically stored. Job has not. Enoch claims he has. Same God, same challenge, same storehouse. The physical universe of the ancient Hebrew was not a chaotic system of random weather patterns and drifting gas. It was a terrifying, perfectly tuned machine. Portals for the stars, storehouses for the hail, tracks for the chariots, winds to drive the gears. Everything locked behind doors, waiting for an appointed time. Enoch maps the east, the west, the north, and the south. He records a complete, terrifying picture of the cosmic boundaries. But there is a problem, a massive, historical problem. If this Book of Enoch maps the exact physical answers to the whirlwind of Job, why was it completely forgotten by the Western world? Where did this astronomical map go? The sun beats down on the limestone cliffs of Qumran, a desolate stretch of the Judean desert just off the coast of the Dead Sea. It is the spring of 1947, and a Bedouin shepherd throws a rock into the dark mouth of a cave. A shatter of pottery echoes out into the dry air. Inside the jar are manuscripts that have not seen the light of the sun for 2,000 years. We know this story. The Dead Sea Scrolls. Among the shattered clay were the great canonical texts of antiquity, the massive Isaiah scroll, the Psalms. But the Essene scribes who hid these writings did not just bury the canonical Bible, they buried the map. For centuries, Western scholars dismissed First Enoch as a late medieval forgery. Because it was preserved primarily in the Ethiopian canon, critics claimed the elaborate, physical descriptions of the sky, the portals, and the star chariots were just an African myth stitched together long after the time of Christ. Then the jars opened. Stop right there. Fragment after fragment of Aramaic text was pulled from the dirt of cave number 4. Scholars translated the brittle parchment and found the astronomical Book of Enoch, the exact same text, the exact same eastern and western gates, the exact same rigorous mathematical counting of the stars. The Qumran community, 2 millennia ago, held this mechanical blueprint of the sky as sacred, protected truth. Why? Why did an isolated sect of devout Jews obsess over the physical portals of the stars? Go to Leviticus 23, 2 inches, the King James. Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, concerning the feasts of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. Look at the word feasts. The Hebrew is moed. It does not mean a festival or a party. It means an appointed time, a strict, non-negotiable divine appointment. God set exact, unyielding dates for the Passover, the Day of Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles. But how do you know when the appointment is? You look at the calendar. And how do you read the calendar? You look at the physical sky. Picture it. If the stars are just random gas drifting in a chaotic vacuum, the calendar drifts. If the calendar drifts, Israel misses the Moedim. They miss the divine appointments. But if Enoch's map is real, if the stars are marshaled out of literal, physical portals in the east, under a terrifying mathematical law, then the calendar is ironclad. The sky is not just a ceiling, it is a massive, turning clock built to keep time for the laws of God. I offer it as that, one tradition's record, but sit with the weight of it. The Essenes copied the astronomical Book of Enoch because they believed the physical survival of their faith depended on knowing exactly how the machinery of heaven operated. They sealed it in jars because they believed the world was forgetting the gates. Read Daniel 12, 4 inches, the King James. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Same desert, same preservation, the physical map of the cosmos was buried in the dark, waiting for an age that had forgotten the sky had doors. The Qumran caves prove the ancient Hebrew mind did not view Enoch's celestial journey as a fairy tale. They viewed it as the ultimate answer to the mechanics of creation. The Dead Sea Scrolls prove this cosmic map was held as sacred, physical truth by the ancient world. But the ultimate proof of this architecture does not live in a cave in Qumran. It lives in the violent storm where our mystery began. What happens when we take Enoch's shattered map of the celestial gates and lay it directly over the impossible questions God hurled at Job? The sand settles back to the desert floor. The whirlwind of ooze is still spinning, and the maker of the universe is still speaking. Go back to the very first scene of this mystery. The broken man covered in ash, the unyielding voice demanding an answer. Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? When we first read that canonical challenge, we assumed the modern answer. We thought God was pointing Job toward the infinite, unreachable vacuum of outer space. We thought the question was a rhetorical impossibility designed to crush a mortal with his own smallness. But you have walked to the edge of the world now. You have seen the map. When God asks Job if he can loose the bands of Orion or guide the stars in their seasons, he is not speaking in poetic metaphors. He is pointing to the literal tracks. He is pointing to the physical chariots driven by the winds. He is pointing to the massive, structural doorways at the eastern and western extremes of the earth. Job had no answer. He had never been to the gates, but the ancient Jewish mind believed a mortal man had already stood exactly where God dared Job to stand. Read Jude 1, 14 inches, the King James. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these. Stop right there. The New Testament writers did not forget the man who was taken. The brother of Jesus quoted 1 Enoch directly. The early church fathers read it. The Essenes buried it in the desert of Qumran to protect it. They knew the sky was not a random expanse of burning gas. They knew it was a heavily governed system, marshaled by an angel, locked to a divine calendar. Picture it. Two men in the ancient text. One sits in the ash, crushed by the terrifying weight of a cosmic law he cannot see. The other is lifted out of his timeline, carried to the physical precipice where the sky meets the dirt, and handed a stylus to write that exact law down. Same sky, same maker, same terrifying precision. I offer this as one reading, one careful bridge between an ancient preserved text and the canonical storm of Job. I am not handing you doctrine. I am handing you the parallel and letting you sit with it. We have modern telescopes that can pierce billions of light years into the dark, but we have lost the architecture. We no longer see the gates. We no longer hear the roll call at the sunrise. Much of the ancient mind's understanding of this machinery makes sense now, resolving the strange vocabulary of the biblical authors who wrote about the storehouses of the snow and the chariots of the sky. But the rest remains hidden. The literal, physical coordinate where the firmament anchors to the ground is not on any modern map. Our dimensional sight is blocked. The dark is still holding the rest. Go back now to the desert of Uz, the whirlwind, the man in the ash. You have read God's challenge 100 times. But tonight, the sky above that desert is not empty anymore. It is alive with entities, driven by the winds, marshaled through the great portals of the east, marching to an unbreakable law. If you stayed with me through this entire journey to the borders of creation, comment the word "watched" down below. Subscribe to this channel, because we are going to keep opening the ancient texts the world tried to leave buried. And send this video to one specific person who loves the mysteries of the Old Testament, but has never heard what the seventh from Adam saw at the edge of the sky. The stars are still keeping their appointed time, even if we have forgotten the doors they walked through.